Okay, hey guys. All right, so now I'm going to show you some examples of how to solve one-step equation with multiplication and division, but this time our equations just got a little more complicated. They now have decimals and fractions. So I want to make sure you understand those examples as well. Copy down 3 examples for me into your notes. In the first one, we have n divided by 8 equaling 1.75. So these are obviously going to be a little bit harder to evaluate mentally. And I want, again, our objective here is to learn how to show our work, learn how to actually solve these equations. So I'm just as concerned with your work as I am with your final answer. All right, so remember, step 1 is to isolate the variable. We want to get n alone, which means we want to get rid of the 8. We want to move the 8 to the other side. We do that by inverse operations, so this is division. So I'm going to multiply by 8, because 8n over 8 will give me 1n. The 8's cancel. Remember, the golden rule of algebra says you do to one side what you do to the other. So I have to also multiply this side by 8. Okay, now I'm ready to solve. When multiplying decimals, you do not have to line up the decimals. Multiply as usual. 5 times 8 is 40. 7 times 8 is 56 plus 4, which is 60. 1 times 8 is 8 plus 6, which is 14. And then place your decimal 2 times, 2 times. Count all the numbers, the digits behind the decimal point. And you can see your answer is going to be plain old 14. Make sure you check your signs. There was no negatives there. Okay? All right, here we have an example where we have 0.6 being multiplied by m. Okay, so same 3 steps. We are going to first try to isolate m by moving this 0.6 or 6/10, and it's negative. We got to use inverse operations. Okay, so the opposite of what is going on here anyway? Multiplication. This means multiplication. So the opposite of multiplication is division. Again, we show division by using a fraction bar, and we're going to divide by the exact number with the variable. So that would be negative 0.6. We have to divide by the negative because that will isolate the m. Negative 0.6 divided by negative 0.6 will give me 1. If I forget to put a negative there, then I'll still be left with a negative 1m. I don't want a negative. So divide by the exact same thing. Whatever you do to one side, do to the other. Divide by negative 0.6. And m equals, okay, I know my answer is going to be a positive because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. And let's review how to divide a decimal by a decimal. Okay, so we have 5.1 divided by 0.6. I never want to divide by a decimal. I'm just going to make it a whole number by moving the decimal point to the end of the number. In order to keep things proportional, if I'm going to make this 6 wholes, I'm going to also move this decimal to the end of this number 1 time. However many times I move the decimal in the divisor, I also move the decimal in the dividend. So I now have 6 divided into 51. Okay, I'll add a decimal there. And let's see. So 6 goes into 51 8 times. 8 times 6 is 48. Got a remainder of 3. And when I bring down a 0, 6 goes into 30 exactly 5 times. When I have a remainder of 0, I'm finished. If I didn't get a remainder of 0, I would continue to drop down zeros until I get to a point where I find if the decimal repeats or terminates. Add my decimal point here, just line it up. So my answer is positive 8 and a half, or 8 5/10, or 8.5. Okay, make sure you're writing down all these notes. And let's look at a fraction example. Take a look at this one. Negative 3/5 x equals negative 6. All right, so first of all, you should notice this is a multiplication example. 3/5 is next to the x, so it's actually being multiplied by the x. So we're going to treat it as a multiplication example. You could think of it as division. You could think of it as being divided by 5, multiplied by 3. We're going to keep things simple and see it as multiplication. So, to solve this one, to get x alone, I'm going to have to move the 3/5. I'm going to move the 3/5 by dividing this whole thing by, and it's negative 3/5. Because if I do negative 3/5 divided by negative 3/5, I'll have 1, right? And that's what I want. I want x to be alone. 1x is the same thing as x, because that's how I'll solve it. Whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other. And here comes the tricky part. If I'm going to divide this side by negative 3/5, I want to just remind you of what this actually means. We're showing the work a little differently than when we learn how to multiply and divide fractions. So what we actually have here is we have negative 6 wholes divided by negative 3/5. Okay, so to solve this, I'm just going to remember how to divide fractions. I'm going to make any whole or any mixed number, I'm going to make it improper. So that's negative 6 over 1. I'm going to change the division to multiplication, and I'm going to flip the second fraction. So that becomes negative 5 over 3. So dividing a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal. Remember that? We already studied division of fractions. If this were a mixed number, I would make it improper before flipping it. Okay? So now I can try to cross simplify if possible. I can simplify the 3 and the 6 and make that 1 and 2. If I divide by 3, 2 times 5 is 10. 1 times 1 is 1. A negative times a negative is a positive. So my final answer, when I put this into the proper form, is 10. 10 wholes. X equals positive 10. You might need to study that again. You might need to rewind the video and watch me do that again. And that's the nice thing about this video is you can slow me down and pause me. Make me go slow motion if you want. Okay, are you ready to try some? All right, I'd like you to try, not all of these. Why don't you do, I'd like you to do number 5b down here. 5 equals negative 5 times x. And why don't you do number 2 and number 1. Let's do 1, 2, and 5b down there. Pause the video, and then we'll go over them. All right, let's take a look at how you did these. Again, I'm really concerned with your work, so I want to make sure you are checking the way I show my work is the same way you did it. So let's start with number 1. In this example, we haven't seen this yet. The variable is on the right. It's on this side. So don't be fooled. We still have to move the 1.2. We're going to move the number with the variable. It's being multiplied by a, so we're going to do the opposite and divide by 1.2. That will cancel it out. A is alone. Whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So I'm going to divide this by 1.2. And if we do a little mental division here, maybe you can follow me on this. I can move the decimal to the end here and the decimal to the end here, and I see it's actually just 96 divided by 12. And 96 divided by 12 is 8. It was a negative divided by a positive, which means my final answer is going to be negative 8. A equals negative 8. You can reverse that if you want, so you can read it from left to right. How'd you do? Let's take a look at number 2. I'm going to rewrite this so you can see it's negative 3.4 equals x over 5.02. All right, so again, my variable's on the right-hand side, so I have to move the number with the variable. So 5.02 or 5 200 is the number I'm going to be moving. So I'm going to move it by multiplying both sides by 5.02, because look, it's being divided by 5.02. So the opposite of division is multiplication. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to multiply by 5.02. Okay, that'll cancel. And I'm just going to come down here. X is now alone. And let's do the multiplication. 5.02 multiplied by 3.4. Okay, I don't have to be worried about lining up my decimals. I'm going to be concerned with that at the end. 2 4s are 8, 0 times 4 is 0, 5 times 4 is 20. Put my placeholder. 2 times 3 is 6. 0 times 3 is 0. 5 times 3 is 15. Add those up. And hopefully you've already done this and you're just checking your work. Now I'm going to place my decimal. I have 2 digits behind this decimal point, 1 digit behind that decimal point. That's a total of 3 decimal places. So my final answer here is 17.068, or 17 and 68 thousandths. One more thing. I was actually doing a positive times a negative up there, so my final answer is negative. Ooh, did you get that one right? Okay, go back over your work. Go back over my example if you didn't, and make sure you understand it. Okay, let's look at this last one. Let's look at 5B. I'm going to move all this up here. Okay, and rewrite it. 5 equals negative 5/9 x. Okay, in all these examples, our variable has been on the right-hand side. So we're going to make sure we move the number with the variable. And 5/9 is being multiplied by x. So I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to divide by the whole number with the x and negative 5/9. That will cancel it out and make x alone. But here's the work. I've got to divide the other side by negative 5/9. Let's take a look at what that actually is. That is 5 divided by negative 5/9. All right, so if I have any mixed numbers or any mixed numbers or whole numbers, I'm going to make them improper. So this becomes 5 over 1. This becomes multiplication, and I flip the second fraction. Again, division is multiplying by its reciprocal. Okay, I can cross simplify here. I can divide the 5s by 5 and get 1s. 1 times 9 is 9. 1 times 1 is 1. And a positive times a negative is a negative. And negative 9 over 1 is simply negative 9 wholes. Did you get that one right? All right, these are quite a bit more difficult than what we were doing yesterday with simple one-step equation. These are a little more complicated one-step equation. Hang in there. We'll practice some more tomorrow. Make sure you bring your notes, and I will see you then.